Western governments claim to be democracies, and in fact, they often try to justify their intervention and meddling in the internal affairs of foreign countries by claiming that they're defending so-called democracy. But a series of recent events in France demonstrate how many Western governments are in fact anti-democratic and in reality are oligarchies that only serve the rich at the expense of the vast majority of the population. Now, France is currently governed by the President Emmanuel Macron, who is a multimillionaire banker who is popularly known as the President of the Rich. He comes from the center-right, and his constituency are the oligarchs of France. In June and July, France held new elections, and Macron's center-right bloc lost those elections. In fact, a left-wing coalition got more votes than any other party or grouping. However, Macron has made a de facto alliance with the far right and has appointed a right-wing prime minister from the Republican Party, which won around 6% of the vote in the election. They came in fourth place. They were the losers of the election. And yet Macron chose a right-wing politician from their party in order to form a new government, blocking the left from coming to power, essentially stealing the election. I'm going to talk more about this scandal, which some French politicians are referring to as a coup, that the French leader has carried out a coup. These controversies show how Western governments do not actually care about democracy. In fact, they only care about maintaining their hegemony and acting on behalf of the rich billionaire capitalist oligarchs who fund the politicians in the West, and then Western governments make policies on behalf of those oligarchs. This is not democracy if we understand democracy being ruled by the people. In reality, what we see in the West is plutocracy, rule by and for the rich. Macron is the perfect symbol of this. There's a reason he's known popularly in France as the president of the rich. He got his career started as an investment banker working for billionaire oligarchs. And ever since becoming president in 2017, basically all of his policies have served the rich, a small handful of elites, at the expense of the majority of the French population, of the working class. One of the first things that Macron did after coming to office is he ended a wealth tax on the rich. And given this, it should come as no surprise that Macron is very unpopular in France. A poll in May found that Macron's approval rating was just 26%, one-fourth of the population. And if you look at surveys from the past few years, you can see that Macron has not had the support of the majority of the population. His approval rating peaked in 2022 with the proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, but it peaked at only 40%. Even then, at the highest point, the disapproval rating was over half the population. And his approval rating has continued to fall drastically since then, especially in 2023, when he rammed through undemocratic legislation, forcibly increasing the retirement age without a vote. This led to massive protests with millions of people on the streets condemning the banker president, the president of the rich, for cutting taxes on the rich while increasing the retirement age. And some people like to make fun of the French, claiming that they're lazy and they're always protesting, and that it was reasonable for Macron to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 because it was too low. But in reality, this comes at the same time that he has been cutting taxes on the rich. He eliminated the wealth tax, and even Forbes acknowledged in an article, quote, "France's rich get much richer after abolition of wealth tax." So Macron says we have to raise the retirement age and cut social programs for working people because we simply don't have the money. But in reality, they don't have the money because he's cutting taxes on the rich. And the inequality in France is becoming more and more extreme. In fact, 50% of the French population lives on less than 1,930 euros a month after taxes, meaning that they make about 25,000 US dollars per year. Meanwhile, the average 50 square meter or 530 square feet apartment in Paris costs 2,000 euros a month to rent, meaning that half the French population cannot even afford renting an apartment, a modestly sized apartment in Paris, yet alone buy one. The average apartment of that size in Paris costs 500,000 euros. So it's not like the average French person is living this crazy, unreasonable life of luxury and they simply protest because they're lazy. A study that was recently published shows just how insanely wealthy billionaire oligarchs have become in recent years in France under Macron and his center-right neoliberal allies. This study looks at the wealth of the 500 richest families in France. And in 1996, the 500 richest families in France had wealth that equaled 6% of the country's GDP. As of 2017, the 500 richest families had wealth equaling 20% of France's GDP. As of 2022, the 500 richest families in France now have wealth equal to 45% of the entire country's GDP. I need to emphasize this point. This is incredible. The 500 richest families in France now have wealth that is nearly equal to half the value of all of the goods and services produced in the entire country in 1 year. And that has exploded since 2017 when Macron, the banker president, the president of the rich, came to office. In my reports here, I talk a lot about the US capitalist oligarchs who have taken over the government and basically run society on their behalf. People like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg. But France also has its own billionaire capitalist oligarchs, including some of the richest people on earth. As of 2023, these included people like Bernard Arnault, who has around $200 billion of assets. Also, Françoise Bettencourt-Meyers, who has nearly $100 billion worth of wealth. The Wertheimers, Pinault. There are many other families that have tens of billions of dollars of wealth. In fact, the French billionaire oligarch Bernard Arnault recently overtook Elon Musk to become the richest human being on Earth. Arnault had a wealth of around $233 billion, according to a recent report in Forbes. Of course, given market fluctuations in the value in the stock market and other assets, sometimes that evaluation changes. But the reality is that he's among the top 5 richest human beings on Earth. A lot of people probably haven't heard of Arnault, but they have certainly heard of his company. He is the chairman and CEO of LVMH, which is a luxury goods company popularly known as Louis Vuitton. And in addition to Louis Vuitton, LVMH owns many other luxury brands like Hennessy, Tiffany, Dior, Marc Jacobs, and many other luxury brands. And the fact that this company, which is their clients are exclusively the rich, the fact that they are doing so well, while many countries are entering recession and there are fears of a global recession, this demonstrates the fact that these oligarchs, these big, powerful capitalists around the world, their lives are getting better and better as they get richer and richer at the expense of the working majority. The working class is getting worse off and worse off. And it should come as no surprise that Bernard Arnault, one of the richest human beings on earth, is a huge supporter of Emmanuel Macron. Back in 2017, when Macron became president, this billionaire praised him. And he complained that before Macron was president, quote, corporations were ostracized from society, end quote. Absolutely amazing. I mean, these billionaire capitalist oligarchs who control everything, they have such a victimhood complex. They always think that they're the victims, everyone else is out to get them, while they suck up the wealth produced by workers everywhere. And of course, this billionaire oligarch Arnault praised Macron and said that Macron shares our vision and he will bring more investment and more growth in France. Well, we've seen in the past 7 years under Macron that all of the investment and growth has gone to benefit billionaire capitalist oligarchs like Arnault. And in fact, in March 2024, Macron invited a bunch of billionaire oligarchs to Paris to receive awards. Among them were Elon Musk, who had a one-on-one meeting with Macron, also Beyonce, who is extremely wealthy now, and, drumroll, Bernard Arnault, who was the world's richest man. He was invited as a guest of honor to this party, and Macron gave him France's highest honor. And of course, while this is all happening, these billionaires are demanding that Macron implement political decisions on their behalf. There have been reports in mainstream corporate media discussing how Arnault was lobbying Macron to pick a prime minister that he liked, and certainly not to allow anyone remotely on the left to become prime minister in France. So this brings us back to the election that was held in France in June and July. Macron personally called for these elections, and his center-right party, the bloc known as Ensemble, they lost the election. And who came in first place? A left-wing coalition known as the New Popular Front, which won more votes than any other bloc. In third place was the far-right coalition under the party National Rally, which used to be known as the National Front, led by Marine Le Pen, who is the daughter of a Holocaust denier and a notorious apologist for Nazi-occupied France. She has tried to distance herself from her Holocaust-denying fascist father, but he founded her political party that she became the leader of, and it's well known that she is linked to very far-right extreme forces in France. Her party came in third place, and then below them was the Republicans. This is the traditional right-wing party that had governed France. If you know, for instance, the former French president Sarkozy, he came from the Republicans. They were decimated in the election. The Republicans only got around 6% of the vote. However, Macron decided to appoint as prime minister the politician Michel Barnier from the right-wing Republican Party that only won 6% of the vote. So this is a blatant violation of democracy. Macron and his right-wing allies lost, and yet he appointed the people who lost to rule the government. And in reality, what's happening here is that there is an unspoken alliance between Macron, the center-right, he represents the center-right, and the far-right, represented by Marine Le Pen, because her party has tacitly endorsed the appointment of this right-wing prime minister, Michel Barnier, from the Republicans. So he's essentially the consensus candidate between the center-right Macron supporters and the far-right Le Pen supporters. She is the one holding together this new government. So this is an alliance between the centrists and the far-right to prevent the left, which won the election, from coming to power. And it's clear that Macron made this agreement in a private meeting that he held with the far-right leader Le Pen just a few days before making this announcement. The leader of the French left-wing coalition that won the election has openly said that Macron is stealing the election. Jean-Luc Mélenchon is a longtime left-wing leader in France. He's also very anti-war, unlike Macron, who of course is pro-war and pro-NATO. And Mélenchon published a video and he said, quote, "Emmanuel Macron officially denies the result of the legislative elections. He has just appointed Michel Barnier, a member, among others, of a party that came last in the legislative election. And then he added, quote, Emmanuel Macron stole the election from the French people, end quote. And also a lawmaker from Mélenchon's left-wing anti-war party, La France Insoumise, she said that, quote, 52 days after the government was defeated at the polls, Macron continues to see himself as an autocrat. By appointing Michel Barnier, the president refuses to respect popular sovereignty and the choice made at the ballot box. Against this unacceptable democratic coup, she said, join us on the streets. And the left-wing party of Mélenchon has called for mass protests to defend the election against what they're referring to as a coup by the autocrat, the banker, millionaire oligarch, and president of the rich, Macron. Mélenchon and the French left are also calling for a vote to impeach Macron, and a poll, in fact, found that a slight majority of people in France, 52%, support a motion to impeach Macron. Again, 52% of the population want to vote to remove Macron from office. However, if you look at comments made by EU officials, who, by the way, are mostly unelected, you can see how blatantly anti-democratic the European Union is. The head of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, tweeted out congratulations to Michel Barnier on his appointment as prime minister. She said, I know that Michel Barnier has the interests of Europe and France at heart. I wish him every success in his new mission. Similar comments were made by Christine Lagarde, who was previously the economic minister of France, a neoliberal, and she also serves the billionaire oligarchs. She was previously the director of the IMF. She's now the president of the European Central Bank. She congratulated Michel Barnier. She said, we have known each other for many years. I am confident you will do an excellent job serving the people of France and Europe. What was even funnier was the statement made by Canada's centrist neoliberal Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He congratulated Michel Barnier. And what's so funny is he said that Canada and France share values of democracy and freedom. I know we'll work closely together. This is a complete farce. Michel Barnier is the opposite of a symbol of democracy. He's a symbol of authoritarianism. His party, the Republicans, the right-wing party of this right-wing politician, Michel Barnier, they lost the election. They get around 6% of the vote. They came in last place. But Macron, the oligarch-serving president of the rich, appointed Barnier, despite the fact that he has no democratic mandate. And Macron has made it clear that he doesn't care about democracy. He doesn't care that he and his allies lost the election, because this is what capitalism actually is. There's no such thing as a capitalist democracy. Capitalism is always ruled by the capitalist oligarchs. If you are rich, you can control the government. That's how the system works. It's a plutocracy. It's an oligarchy. It is not a democracy. And this is how all of these Western governments actually operate. They're not democracies. Yes, they have elections, but in those elections, the candidates are funded and essentially chosen by the rich oligarchs. It's the best so-called democracy that money can buy, which means that it's not democracy. Real democracy means rule by and for the people. This is not rule and by for the people. This is rule by and for the rich capitalist oligarchs. So they get richer while the working majority gets poorer and poorer.